India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has lashed out at what he terms Europe's hypocrisy on Russia. Speaking to Austria's national broadcaster ORF on the Russia-Ukraine war, Jaishankar slammed Europe's criticizing India's armed energy imports from Russia, even as he reiterated the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to end the conflict in Ukraine. Jaishankar hit out when asked questions about India's oil imports from Russia. The Indian minister pointed out what he called Europe's double standards, saying that Europe's imports from Russia seem to be acceptable, but the continent painted India's oil needs as a crime.
You know, Europe imported in the same period 6 times the energy which India did. Essentially, if it is a matter of principle, why didn't Europe cut on the first day? Why didn't we see on 25th of February a complete cutoff of energy imports from Russia? You can't say it's my principle, but by the way, I will do it by my timing.
Jaishankar slammed European nations for their own violations of national sovereignty as they roll out accusations against Russia on the war in Ukraine. Listen in.
I can give you many instances of countries who have violated the sovereignty of another country. You know, if I were to ask where Europe stood on a lot of those, I'm afraid I'll get a long silence.
Jaishankar pointed out that Russia had stood by India at a time when Western nations were arming Pakistan.
We've had a long-term relationship with Moscow. I think it's important to look at that history of the relationship. It was a relationship built in a period when Western democracies used to arm a military dictatorship called Pakistan and deny India defensive weapons. So if we are talking about principles, let's talk a little bit of history out here.
India's External Affairs Minister also took a dig at China over the India-China border standoff. He pointed out that China had violated bilateral agreements with India on the line of actual control and attempted to change the status quo. There is visible evidence, he said, of China amassing troops near the LAC.
The record is very clear because today, you know, there's a lot of transparency. You have satellite pictures. If you see who moved the forces to the border areas first, I think the record is very clear.
The last India-China clash happened in the Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh on the 9th of December. It is the first major clash between the Indian and Chinese armies since the fierce face-off in the Galwan Valley in June 2020 that marked the most serious military conflict between the two sides in decades. The two countries have held 17 rounds of talks so far to resolve the standoff. For more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal sent us this report from New Delhi.
Well, today is the last day of the Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar's Austria visit. He meets the IAEA Director General. But last 2 days have been hectic in terms of his conversation with his Austrian side. 5 pacts were signed, including one on mobility and migration that will pave way for legal migration of Indians to that country. But essentially, there were many occasions where the Indian minister called out Pakistan and China. On Pakistan, he said that the country is an epicenter of terrorism and highlighted Islamabad's support to cross-border terrorism and its involvement in the attacks, whether it's the parliament attack or whether it's the 26/11 Mumbai terror attack on China. He said that there is an intense challenge from China, especially when it comes to a line of actual control in India's northern borders, and also pointed that how China is trying to unilaterally change the status quo at the border area. So concerns regarding both Islamabad and Beijing laid out by the Indian minister in foreign soil, and this is something that is reflective of the larger mood as well here in India, in Delhi, and the concerns regarding these two countries. But largely, we know that India is also focusing on improving or increasing its relationship with European countries. And this visit to Austria is a kind of symbolic of how India plans to take ties with European capitals in near future. With video journalist Chandrasekhar Sudhan Sibal for WION in New Delhi.